that led them to discover that he had lymphoma.
Getting ready to
So
make
they said, you're
5 or 6 job offers, and those people this next week to start April, and so we'll be fully staffed.
Bet on myself.
Fully staffed.
Yeah.
Our allocation so far up to what we're allocating ourselves.
So we are short of a quorum, but we can get some of the other stuff started early. We're a little bit over time, so hopefully Silver or Lindsay will show up. Edward won't have tonight, and neither of the counselors will be able to make it either. Can we review the agenda without a quorum? Just take
I
a
think
moment to look over
you
it.
can discuss what the agenda is.
You got it.
You can't make any motions or.
So first off, we will be meeting the K-9 unit.
We're going to scoot down a little closer, guys. There's no like
Come on
a
down.
huge empty space.
We'll be meeting the K-9 unit. Thank you so much for joining us. And then we will review a little bit of the deadly force investigations protocols. This is limited to what EPD does. We don't really go into the wider political issues surrounding that in this one. But we can hopefully get some questions answered and lay some foundations for asking questions in the future. And then finally, we will have Sergeant Smith come in to talk about some of the things going on downtown.
I have a nicety, perhaps. I think this should read, perhaps, Police Commission Downtown Priorities Discussion, or Police Commission Priorities Downtown Discussion. It's not Downtown Police Commission.
Yeah.
We'll call that a scrivener's error.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, I guess we can go with public comments or commissioner comments. Start off with V. Do you want to start us
We
off?
do public comments first?
I don't think we've got any.
Well, I was going to ask. Anybody have any public comments? I don't know if the young lady wanted to make any comments. No? Okay. Then I'll turn it over to you.
Sweet. And we've got quorum.
Yay.
Celebration. Yeah, so commissioner comments, starting with V.
I'm just excited to attend the Asian celebration this weekend, and looking forward to representing the commission there. And we, Jeremy, Sean, and I, we talked about maybe having some candy to bring, and so I think with the opening of some more slots, if there are anybody who can't pick up some candy here because there's probably not enough, let me know, or if you like, you can pick it up yourself. And I think, Sean, you would compensate for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Or reimburse, I should say.
So yeah, just happy to be here, and I have just a couple quick updates for HRC. Our last meeting, we primarily voted. So we voted in for our chair. We have Joel Iboa again as our chair, and then I was voted in as vice chair. So I'm doing vice chair. And that's pretty much it. That was pretty much all we did last meeting. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. On Tuesday, the Civilian Review Board had our meeting. We had a training session on training, on officer training, which is obviously a big topic in EPD right now with so many new officers onboarding. We reviewed an interesting case looking at an officer who was in training and their supervising training officer for that particular evening, and it reminds me how important it is to be intentional about how we're training people, who are training people, how we supervise training officers in the field. And it also reminds me of sort of this monumental task that EPD is facing right now with so many new officers. It's sort of an exciting time because it's setting the trajectory for the next generation of EPD, and it's also a really big job. So that's all that I have from the CRB. I don't have anything else specific to say for myself. Thank you.
And just that Edward sends his apologies that he couldn't attend tonight.
I've noticed something. With some frequency, we see news articles or little blurbs about canines activities. And what I've noticed is about myself. Every time I see that, I feel a little, I don't know, glee or a kind of internal cheer. I'm just really happy that we have effective canine units in town. It pleases me whenever I read about it. And since I'm representative of one whole end of town, I assume there are many, many people like me who are glad to see that. Those units operating. That's all.
Thank you.
I just want to welcome everyone. Congratulations, Amanda, on being vice chair of HRC. And I do want to kind of a little bit along Will's thing. It's nice to see how much the department is getting out information through social media about things that are going on around town, whether it's a critical incident or it happens to be a capture from one of the K-9 units. I think it's good to that transparency of what's happening around the city. I think it's great, and you guys have done a really tremendous job over the last 12 to 18 months of getting that information out.
Thank you for that feedback. Yeah, I don't have any comments at this time. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
I just want to share real quickly that your council liaisons both wrote in and apologized for not being able to make it tonight. So.
Let's spend a couple of seconds reviewing the agenda as well as the notes from January, and we will now take a motion to accept both.
Did you guys do public comment already?
We have, but we're going a little bit out of order. I don't mind if you fill out one, and we'll do that. We'll give you a chance to say something.
Well, I'll move for approval of the minutes of the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, it's all approved. Thank you so much. Let's do public comment if you've got it ready. Sorry for the rush.
Why don't you go ahead and make your comment, then you can fill out the form afterwards and hand it to me.
Okay. Good idea.
Come on. You've done this before, you know you have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 20 seconds
I'm not going to run my
left.
mouth, that's okay.
So start anytime you're ready.
So the council isn't here?
No,
It's
there's
kind of a good thing. The reason I say that is because this has to do with the group Eugene Wake Up and Elkhorn Brewery. I don't really go there, I'm vegetarian, but I like the guy, and I think it's a dirty deal what's happened to him, the vandalism, and then now these people in their banner had been out, and I don't know if you guys heard Mike Clark make I didn't go to the council meeting, but I watched that excerpt of Mike Clark on YouTube. He totally summed it up. I would like the council and the mayor to get on board with actually caring about the people who paying the property tax, and that includes renters, and rather than all the bums. That's the bottom line. They don't seem to care about anybody but what more they can do, what more services, hand-wringing. And the business owners, my son and daughter-in-law worked 7 days a week to start their business. And they got a mortgage. So they're the evil houseies that these guys say. Well, some of them are down on their luck, but there's a ton of services. Many of them are just plain lazy. And some are just plain troublemakers. Like that Eric Jackson and whoever his clone is now, speaking the same complaint. So bottom line is, can the police commission and the police somehow make it known to the council that they are basically, in a sense, doing taxation without representation. They're taking our money, they don't care about us. And I'm part of 2 groups, and it's come to that. Those guys shouldn't have to hire their separate security. Bottom line is, when are all the people who support the city going to count? And when are they going to back the police? I will be so frustrated if I was an officer. You know, they're supposed to put up with everything. Everybody's filming them. I will be hard pressed not to do some beat downs. I swear to God, with what goes on. And I'm glad they pushed them out of there at Elkhorn. Gave them a shove and tore up some of their posters. So that's what I would like to see from the commission to the council.
Thank you so much for your comment. Reviewed and approved the notes already. Let's move into the meeting with Canine Unit. Come on up.
Well, hello. How are you? I'm Sergeant Rob Griesel, and I'm the supervisor for the Canine Unit for here. It was nice to hear your comments about our public outreach attempts. We've been working really hard on that for the last 9 months or so, and I'm glad to hear it's making a difference out there. We don't get a ton of feedback, but it's nice to hear that's making a difference. We've got 2 social media websites of our own that we're pushing out, Facebook and Instagram, and then the Eugene Police Department pushes our material out as well.
It's really good.
John and Melinda have been very good about picking up on things and getting it out to the media. The dog we were supposed to have here, who got called away on a call, is Canine Ike, who you may have seen in the paper recently. Just had 4 captures this weekend. He's a brand new dog. He's only 18 months old. He's doing great. Really so, and that's where we're at with our unit a lot. We're really young. We've got our most experienced dog is about 5 years old. Quick. He's been on the street for 3 years now. So it's kind of a young unit. The rest of them are all. We got 2 less than 2-year-old dogs and 1 3-year-old dog, and all of them have less than a year on the street. So it's a young unit, but they're doing very, very well. We're very proud of the progress they're making. So it's been good.
So if anybody has any questions?
I'd be interested, what is the commitment to being a canine officer? Do you expect to continue that indefinitely, or?
So the initial commitment is life of the dog.
Okay.
So that's typically, we get the dogs around 2 years old.
The working life of the dog.
Working life,
yeah. Working life of the dog. And the life the dog goes, we usually try to run them until they're about 9. I mean, it just kind of depends on the life they've had and kind of the build and breed of the dog. The Malinois tend to last a little bit longer than the Shepherds, but yeah. So, but typically the training is so involved. There's so much to learn. It's more of an art than a science for the handlers. Okay. So, I mean, it can take you 5 years as a handler to really understand the little nuances of it. So a lot of them run a second dog or a third dog after that.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Can you say anything about the motivation for officers to get into doing this? I mean, it would vary, I suppose.
I can speak for myself.
Sure.
For me, I grew up with dogs. I love dogs. But then, obviously that took I wasn't planning on that as being part of my career necessarily, but I got into police work, and it's a very kind of tip of the spear endeavor where you're really putting yourself out there and trusting in yourself and this canine partner, and you're investing a lot of time in it, and it's very dangerous work. I don't know the exact statistics, but it's I think the average officer is something like, maybe there's a 1 in 30 chance you'll be involved in a shooting as a police officer. As a canine handler, there's like a 1 in 5. Like, because you're going to the dangerous calls, you're going, I mean, that is your primary response. You're out in the woods by yourself with the dog, hunting bad guys. I mean, and that's really what you're doing. But for me, it was more about switching gears from, I'd been a patrol officer for 12 plus years before I got into it, and was ready to do something different. Was ready for a challenge that was a little more my speed, and but you got to be really willing to be humble and learn this new thing. It's not police work, it's dog work, it's canine handling, and it's a completely different profession almost.
Wow.
Sergeant, can you talk a little bit about the training? You say it's very involved, and I know it's even, if I understand, you go away to a school for a while, and then come back with your dog. So maybe a little more about what the officers go in the beginning, and then kind of their ongoing training that you do.
Sure. Yeah. So we belong to an organization called the Oregon Police Canine Association, and that's run through our state. There are similar ones in other states. Ours requires a minimum of 260 hours of training as a new handler with your dog to go through it. So it's essentially it's a 6-week class, and they start you with everything from basic obedience up into search work, apprehension work, and all of that. But we've discovered that isn't enough anymore for what we're doing, and we've extended our training out to 400 hours. We don't want to be putting handlers and dogs that aren't ready on the street, and that's kind of what we've been facing the last few years. And canine selection, I can talk about dogs all day. The canine selection we found is incredibly important, and so that's really the beginning of it. We use a kennel out of California typically for our purchase of dogs, and that guy sources his dogs out of Europe, so all over Europe, and he's been doing it forever. And now his son's running the business. But they'll bring back 60, 80 dogs at a time, and most of the West Coast buys their dogs from him. This guy, a lot of them do. So he knows what he's kind of looking for over there, but then dogs are dogs, and they're genetically different, and they have different dispositions and different personalities, and you've got to find one that fits your handler, and you've got to find one that fits the mentality of your department. You don't want one that's too aggressive. We use our dogs for a lot of demonstrations, so we're looking for a dog that's really even, that can go out and do good apprehension work, has the head to be confident in his search work, and then also come into the public setting and be kind and let the kids pet him and stuff like that. So to find that balance is really, really difficult when you go down there and you have maybe only, you're trying to test 15 dogs in 2 days. You only have an hour or two with each dog. It's extremely difficult. We've got 2 very gifted guys that have done it a few times now, and kind of have been better able to pick out those little qualities that we need. So that's how it starts. And then we come back out here and we do a 2-week assessment period with the dog, where we have a very talented trainer, and Michael Casey, who's one of our handlers, and he evaluates the dogs for 2 weeks, decides whether they have those qualities that we want to possess as a department. And then if they do, we send them off to the 6-week class. Right now, the class we're using is a trainer out of Albany, Dan Kloss, and he's an exceptional trainer. He was a dog handler himself in Albany for 20 years. Very, very bright, knowledgeable guy. And at the completion of that class, which goes through all the basics, we bring them back to our department, and we put them through another 2 weeks of testing, preparing them for the street. So that initial 2-week assessment, if we determine the dog doesn't have those qualities that we need, we will send that dog back. The dogs are guaranteed performance-wise, and we'll either go down and select a new dog, or we'll have them send us a dog that they think will meet our criteria. So And then once they're on the street, it's an ongoing training. Our guys train probably 2 hours a night during their shift, and we train every Wednesday for 8 to 10 hours with the dogs. And then we attend 2 regional OPCA trainings every year, which are pretty intensive. They're really great because they're trainers from around the state. We all meet at one location, so they'll be. It's usually at a casino around the state because that's the only place they can house 400 officers and 400 dogs. So that parking lot is crazy. But they have the ability to break out and provide like 20 amazing scenarios for each of the dogs to go through, and it gives us time to evaluate and lets the dogs, all the trainers from around the state get to kind of like give you good bits of advice. So it's kind of like we're not just learning from ourselves, we're learning from everyone around the state. So those are really good, important conferences for us to attend, and as part of our requirements. But yeah, it's pretty intense, and the dogs live with the handlers 24/7, and our handlers are very, very dedicated. They won't tell me, but I'm pretty sure those guys train their dogs every single day, even on their days off. You have to at some point. You have to keep the.
What does that
going.
training consist of?
So
What you
basic,
do every day?
some of it's basic obedience. So we usually started off with that, just a basic obedience. So heeling, sitting, downing. For us, extended long downs is really important because sometimes the officers have to be doing other things. You need your dog to be stable. A lot of it is search work. So we lay tracks for the dogs, which involves generally, like right now I don't have a dog, so I'm the decoy every night. So I get bit. And I'm the guy that goes and hides in the woods. So I will go out and hide, and sometimes I drag a toy or a sleeve or something along with me, or a jacket that they track.
Yeah.
And I'll go hide somewhere, and then they practice coming and finding me, and we evaluate how they do and make adjustments. Some of it, like Officer Thomas right now is doing an article search for SCU for a gun they think was thrown from a car. So the dogs are trained to locate those kind of objects that are tossed from the cars. So Jake's, we'll see how this one goes. He's in the beginning phases of that, so that training takes a little while, but his dog's really responding well to it. So we'll see what happens.
Do you usually begin newer dogs on those sort of searches? Or is it just like as it comes up?
On the article searches?
Yeah.
Typically, that's something we kind of add in a little bit later. We don't train that in the beginning classes or anything like that. Jake's just now starting to imprint that on his dog. And the imprinting is fun to watch. Like, as soon as the dog's nose hits something metallic, hit a clicker, gets paid with food, and that reps. You do hundreds of reps a day with that until the dog is just like, oh, that gets me paid food. Oh, that's great. And then he learns, and then we start putting it down on it. So he finds it, and he'll put his nose on it and be like, this is it, right? Yep. So, yeah, we usually add that kind of stuff later, and that goes with if we were gonna dual certify a dog on narcotics or explosives, that's something we would add later, maybe when the dog's been on the street for 2 years and is showing the ability to add that skill to him. We could potentially add that skill to him if we had the time and money.
You said man and dog are 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
Can you leave the dog if you need to for some reason alone for a period of time?
Oh yeah. So we provide a kennel at the officer's house, and it's usually a 14x7 dog run or something along like that. We roof them and all that so that the dog can't get out. And so yeah, they
can be left.
Oh sure, yeah, they're used to that. We crate train them all, so if they need to be left in a crate for some reason, then we can do that with them as well.
Okay.
Do you want to explain to the group the threshold for your handlers with on leash, off leash, maybe even muzzled or unmuzzled, with types of crime and things like
That's
that?
interesting.
Yeah, so some people are under the impression we just open the door and let the dog do his thing. That's not how it works. The dogs are online. Our dogs are online almost all the time, and most of our handlers run them on a 6-foot line, so they're really close to the officer, which is really dangerous because the dog will sometimes lead you right to the bad guy, and you're only 6 feet away at that point. So that can be a little scary. Other agencies do different. Seattle, we have a good working relationship with Seattle PD Canine Unit, and they run their dogs on like 30-foot lines, and which is scary to me because that dog can go around a corner and potentially bite somebody they don't need to be biting, and so we don't do that. We will run our dogs on longer lines, and if we're in an open field or we can see where we're going, or if we want the dog to have the ability to cast, and we're pretty confident that either the bad guy is the only one out there, and he's met the threshold that allows us to apprehend him using the dog, or what else would we run that? I don't know. Having the dog have some freedom to move, obviously he can cover more ground, is beneficial to us. That's how the dog picks up odor. So in those circumstances, we could run a longer line. I ran my dog most of the time on a 15-foot line, but usually I was choked up to 8 feet on it. It just lets you feed him in if you need to and reel him in when you don't. And I think some of our handlers will probably get to that eventually. Like I say, we got some brand new handlers, so they're still kind of learning. It's better to learn on that shorter leash. We can do searches for, if we've got a missing dementia patient or a missing child or something like that. All our dogs are trained to work into muzzle too, so we can muzzle them and have them search in that realm, and we've done that before. You still have to be very careful with that, like obviously, and we will cut our dogs offline in houses, in buildings and things like that once we've made enough announcements that we're pretty sure the building is vacant and only the suspect left inside. We can't cut the dogs offline and have them search that way. It's much safer for us and for the dog, and he has the ability to move, and the leash gets tangled on everything if you let him just drag it, so you don't want him getting trapped like that he can't defend himself if he's caught around a table and the suspect now has free rein to do what he wants to the dog. That's a bad deal. So I cover it a little bit. We'll do some, we work with our tactical team a lot. We have our own program called TAC Canine, which 2 of our dogs are, one of them's qualified on and one of them's working towards. And so they work directly with our SWAT team for deployments, and that requires a lot of neutralization drills for the dog so that the dog can recognize officer, and that they can take commands from other officers. So the SWAT team's been trained how to call dogs up to the front, because we don't necessarily want to put our handlers up in the very front because maybe it's pretty dangerous. We want to leave the SWAT guys up there. But then they can call the dog to them, and then they can make the decision whether and how they want to deploy it because they've been trained to do so. So that's kind of a cool program that we utilize.
Also throw the camera on the dog, and then a SWAT officer can wear the video system, and so the dog handler's working the dog, and then they have a SWAT officer looking at where the dog's going, clearing a room before any officers have to go in. So
the dogs have got really nice harnesses that they wear that the camera mounts right on top of, and the new system I applied through a grant to try to get the newer one. It's more stable. It's got a stabilizer in it, so it gives us a little bit better picture. But yeah, it comes with 2 monitors, so handler can watch, and then the team commander can watch what the dog's doing and what the dog's seeing. So and then the handler can kind of direct him with hand signals or word of mouth to get him to go where he wants him to go, and down him and let him look and get the lay of the land and let him search.
Does that prove pretty useful?
That's extremely useful. Yeah, we have robots too that can do a similar but robots inevitably will get tangled right away, and then they're out of commission. Like they'll wrap themselves around a towel or clothes or whatever, and they're done. The dog doesn't get caught on anything. So.
Do I see V has a question?
Yeah, you read my mind. So I might be jumping ahead, but what happens to these canines when they retire? Do they stay with the handler, or do they go back to somebody else, or are they up for adoption, or what?
Typically they go to a handler.
Okay.
The handlers like to keep them if they've worked them that long. Like they just kind of become a pet at home and have a good rest of their life. Or if the handler already has other dogs and for whatever reason isn't going to keep him, then there's usually a long list of either retired police officers or retired handlers that are willing to pick the dog up. We're pretty careful about placing them because they have been trained to use their mouth to solve problems, and so we're pretty careful that there's a good understanding with whoever they go to that you need to be you need to be careful with this dog in
Right.
public. Like,
I was just curious if you could talk about how the dogs interact with the suspects when they come in contact with them, how they're trained around that, like around that interaction.
Sure. So we, like I said, we run our dogs almost entirely online when we find them. I'll use Jake's captures this weekend as an example. The dog indicates tracks to a big rhododendron bush in the front yard of a house. The guy's hiding deep in it, back behind it. Dog indicates by barking. So dog locates him, finds him, starts barking, alerts him. We call the guy out, take the guy into custody with the dog there, ready. If the guy wants to fight or whatever, we can disengage and let the dog engage him. The engagements typically they're a use of force, and it's pain compliance. Our dogs are trained to bite and hold, which means they'll grip and they just hang on, essentially. So it's really good for apprehension work if the guy is fleeing, because the dog's just going to grab on, hold, and wait for the officers to get there. So their speed and ability to do that, and then at the same time exert that pain compliance is awesome for taking people into custody at a distance.
Does it ever break the skin of the suspect?
Yeah, it does. Typically what we see out of our dogs, so I don't know how many agencies are doing this. I know we started a program about 7 years ago. We call it bite development. And we got this from a working relationship we have with the Ranger Battalion out of Fort Lewis. So they found a way to teach the dogs how to bite and drive. So you'll see a lot of dogs tug. Tugging causes damage, right? Because you're pulling on someone. So we've taught our dogs how to drive in. So what that does is it takes the force of the dog's mouth off the canines. They're no longer ripping or doing any of that damage. They're driving in, and so they have their molars. So most of the damage we see on people is compression damage, so it's bruising. What you get is you might get an initial puncture from the canines, which is, they don't typically even stitch them. You'll just have those punctures, they'll flush them out, put a Band-Aid on them, and that's it. And then they just have the bruising and the compression damage, which has really been remarkable to watch the difference, from how it used to be, where guys are getting 40 stitches from, and that still happens occasionally. It's pretty rare, but if that's what's happening, it means the suspect's really fighting, probably, and the dog is just trying to hang on. But we don't see that kind of damage much anymore. A lot of it is just that compression damage. So, and it's been, I credit all of that to the bite development training we've been doing.
This is immaterial, of course, but do you use male and female dogs?
We would, yeah. We have had only male dogs. So you don't see the female dogs hit the market and it's not that they're not great and really good, because so Mike Casey is also breeds police dogs and stuff occasionally, and he's got 2 working females across the state right now. The problem is when you have a really good female and she possesses all the traits you want, the breeders keep her for breeding. So you don't see as many of them out there. So you just don't get as many of them available. But we may be looking one for me in July, because that would make my home life way easier, because I have a big male German Shepherd, and I think it would be easier for my life if I had a female working dog.
Yeah, you can't have the same gender in there.
You can't.
Especially female doesn't work.
Yeah, they could get feisty.
Yeah. Or 2 males, I'm sorry.
2 males, same way.
Yeah.
Do the dogs get injured much?
They do.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a hard life.
Yeah.
Lots of punctures. They run into sticks. We're looking for dogs that have a ton of drive, and they're borderline reckless in the way they behave. So they bomb through the woods. They jump off cliffs. They jump off overpasses, and saved luckily by leashes. They fall through attics. If we put them up in an attic, and we've had them fall through the attic. They're going into cars with unknown objects in them. They do everything that cops are doing, except they're doing it at full speed. Don't know to slow down.
So just as a follow-up question, if you have a handler, are they trained to do, CPR or other first aid for the canines?
Yeah, yeah, we talk about that, and there actually is. So OPCA offers a class every through most of their things that is based on first aid. We've gotten a lot of that from the Ranger Battalion. Their dogs get hurt a ton overseas, and so they did a whole class on canine trauma care, which was they have a whole dummy dog that has the entire working arterial system and everything in it, and that was really interesting to go through. But they, you can basically do everything to a dog that you can do to a human, And we've had to include also Narcan in our kits for the dogs. So because of the fentanyl threat and stuff, the dog can get into that really fast, and then they have the same reaction to it that we do. So,
Oh, can I ask a question about that? Okay, I train people to do Narcan, and I get this question all the time. Do you use a different dose for the dogs than you do for a human?
No.
You use the same dose?
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
No, just
helpful
dose
to
it.
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to get it in there.
And you guys use the injection?
I use the same injector that we use for the humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
They have canine ones specifically. We don't have any of those, but
Yeah.
maybe we'll get them. But yeah, we just
Cool.
use the human ones.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming in. And
Yeah, happy. I'm sorry my dog didn't make it back.
What kind of dog is he?
He's a German Shepherd. He's
Okay.
all black German Shepherd. He's pretty cool looking. He's a bundle of energy.
He's ominous looking.
Oh, it is.
It's all black, yeah.
He's ominous looking.
Yeah, he's
And that's half the, part of what Rob didn't talk about is just how much a voluntary compliance they get by
Oh,
just
yeah.
having a dog
Intimidation.
or hearing a dog. If you think about what your visceral reaction is when you have a dog barking at you, imagine that visceral reaction and you've done something wrong. It's just kind of, it compounds itself. So I really appreciate having a tool that, much like a taser display instead of a deployment, anything that gives us a chance to have voluntary compliance without actually having to go hands-on or deploy the dog, I think is a success for us.
yeah. I've threatened to shoot people before, and had that not deter them from continuing to advance on me, but the dog stopped them immediately. Like, oh, I don't want to get bit, but you're okay to get shot. Like,
I think it's like an instinctive thing to
Yeah.
fear, growling.
it's an animal.
The other
Yeah.
thing I would say, and Rob kind of downplayed this or didn't talk about this, is just the talent of these handlers. It really is an art. This dog is constantly communicating to a handler what's going on, and it's up to the handler to be able to better understand what the dog is trying to tell him or her. And I don't know if he would agree with this, but it's been my experience that there's far more bad handlers than there are bad dogs, because of that aptitude to be able to watch and see what your dog's doing and be able to have that translate into communication for the handler to be able to take some action. And so it really is a talent and an art, and it's a craft that they're very dedicated to. And it's pretty impressive when you see the subtleties of the dog, and the handler can verbally tell you or verbalize what's going on. And to a layperson, you're like, there's no chance I would have seen that in that dog. And so it's actually very impressive to watch them.
One thing I didn't get to ask earlier, I'm sorry if this is going over time, do they have any downtime where they get to be just a regular dog,
There you
or?
go.
Yeah. Yeah, when they're at home. Oh, he made it. You were grabbing. Yeah, he's soaking wet. So. Oh, good. When they.
I'm not gonna smell any worse in here.
I was just gonna say, that'll help the smell in here, if anything.
Might be a better smell.
That might be.
When they go home on the weekends, they play like a regular dog somewhat, but they're usually pretty exhausted by the weekend too, and they just need time to relax. I mean, there are handlers that let them in their house, and treat them like a kind of a pet. I encourage our handlers not to do that. I want their home life to be boring. I want their work life to be super exciting. So I kind of, we kind of discourage a little bit of that. I mean, you still got to exercise them every day and go out and play with them. And I know Jake trains every day, but yeah, they definitely have their downtime. But work is play for them. Like, they love it. Eventually, like, they learn that, like, this is the best thing in the world is.
Well, they
going
get
to work.
treats.
Oh yeah, it's so much fun.
Yeah. What's not to like?
So, it's a good life for the dogs. Like, they love it. They're with their buddy 24/7, and riding around in the car all night long, and yeah, it's a good life. Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
It's mainly at night.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we run our dogs mostly at night. That's when they're most effective.
I'm sure.
Daytime, with the way the scent works, in Oregon it's not as big a deal, but in the summers and stuff, like, heat rises really fast, it blows scent away really quickly. Nighttime it tends to settle down on the ground. The dogs are super effective at night, not as much in the day. Chris and I have been on a few hunts during the day, and you're going yard to yard to yard, and you're trying to get that dog within 30 feet of somebody, because other than that, you're not getting much trail or track left. So, that one was, we were out there for an hour, probably in the blazing heat, before we finally found that guy hiding in the...
True.
Yeah. Poor dog was exhausted. I'm at somebody's house. I don't even know whose house it is. I just got their faucet going, and the dog's drinking water in my hands. That's right. He was smoked.
So how do you keep them from overheating, since their coats are black and the car can really heat up really fast?
Well, that's the other reason.
AC
AC runs all the time in the cars.
Yeah.
We don't shut our cars off.
Oh,
Can't. Dogs have to stay cool, or they have to stay reasonably warm, depending on where we're at temperature-wise. The cars are all equipped with paging heat sensor systems, so that if the car does overheat, AC kicks off in the summer or something, it'll let us know. The windows automatically roll down, a horn will start honking, and just to alert people that something's malfunctioning in the car. But yeah, like in the summer, we'll rotate dogs on a search every 20 minutes. Like, we'll call in 3 or 4 dogs because it's too hot.
Right.
Like, the dog's the working temperature. Like, right now, he could run that dog for 2 hours on a track in this temperature. In the summer, 15 minutes. So that makes a big difference.
Good shake.
Got a shower.
This is Ike. He's an 18-month-old German Shepherd. He's from Germany, right? Yeah.
Adorable.
He is, yeah. His commands are in German, for the most part. We may adjust their commands a little bit depending on
Looks like it might be
depending on
mixed.
handler preference. But most of the time we try to keep it pretty consistent.
It's really good.
Super jazzed after the activity earlier.
So you can see those harnesses that he's wearing. So that's super handy because a lot of times we put the dog up on our shoulder to get into attic spaces or get upstairs or get the dog someplace where he doesn't really want to go.
Does it have like a double handle? I can't see.
Yeah, so that one has a handle on the back, in the front, and then in the middle. And those are actually rated to parachute with.
Wow.
Which is kind of cool, but makes them really, really expensive.
Yeah.
But it's totally worth it. He had to hand that dog over 4 fences last weekend, and so we're handing them to officers. He's handing them to an officer, the officer's handing them to him, and having those handles makes the officer feel really comfortable because he has something he can positively control the dog with, and the dog feels comfortable because he's fully supported in that full harness. So it makes the experience a whole lot better for both the officer and the handler. Because our officers aren't really experienced generally around the dogs, so they get nervous, too.
So the vest, is it also doubles up as a protective gear for the dog?
No, it's just for supporting him.
Oh, okay.
For working.
Where's the camera go?
The camera mounts right on top, where that handle is. It Velcro's on, and there's some straps that it attaches to, and it sticks up about 4 or 5 inches. And it's got night vision. And,
it
has a speaker on it that we can hear and talk through to the dog, so we can give commands to the dog through the camera.
Yeah.
Department
More
does
so
have
than
some armored
a,
vests, doesn't
We
it?
do.
Shepherd.
Yep.
That you use selectively.
Yep. Yeah, they're so heavy you can't run the dog in for more than a few minutes. But to be honest with you, we would never intentionally put our dogs into a situation where we think it's going to take fire or get stabbed. Like, we're just not going to sacrifice the dog. We have plenty of other means to get something out of a situation like that. We'll use gas. We'll just wait them out. We'll do something else.
All right, well, we are a little bit over time
But
now.
this is so much fun.
I told you I talk about this all
I
night.
think that's part of the problem.
This is the strategy you learn as a new chief, is that anytime you're going into a tough situation with a tough crowd, you just bring a canine handler. And very quickly, it's not an issue for anything.
Well,
That is
next
true.
up, we have deadly force, but thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry we're late.
That's all right.
No.
Did you find what
Thanks
you
for
were
the work
looking
you
for?
do.
We were looking for guns, but didn't find any
No?
guns.
Okay.
So.
So the vest does not say police on there, though.
They do have some patches.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of just takes the money.
Yeah, it's a hard act to follow.
Very high.
Start with a canine wing, so it's a fact.
Yeah, I think it should have been the reverse order. Yeah, I couldn't find my copy anywhere. It's been a busy day. So.
I've got one. I got next one.
Okay, all right. So we would be looking at just a process review of deadly force investigations. If you want to introduce yourself to everybody.
Yeah, I'm Tim Haywood. I'm a sergeant with Eugene Police. Been here for just about 22 years.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Yeah, can you just go over a little bit of the process?
Yeah, in a deadly force or use of deadly force situation, we'll just start with Eugene Police, but really it's any agency within Lane County. There's a, Jeremy, correct me on the number, the Senate bill?
111.
111. Senate Bill 111 requires a multi-agency response to it. I think it's pretty obvious that that would instill some more transparency, unbiased, better perspectives, just like any task. If you have multiple angles, perspectives, tenures, you get a more thorough package. So if there is a deadly force encounter, no matter what agency in Lane County, the Interagency Deadly Force Investigation Team is activated. I'm a member of that, as well as it fluctuates a little bit, about 5 to 6 detectives from Eugene Police. In addition to that, we'll have various agencies. It's primarily the heavy responses from the Lane County Sheriff, Springfield Police, Oregon State Police, and Eugene Police. We do have some other agencies that are members of the team. We'll end up with anywhere, Chris Mack used to be on it, anywhere from 15 to at times almost 30 detectives. So it gives you a pretty broad ability to handle whatever task might be coming your way. So whenever you have a deadly force encounter, we end up having a quite robust response from both our own agency and a lot of our partner agencies. And the use of deadly force is what's investigated by the IDFIT team. Usually these events are precipitated by a criminal act, because otherwise the law enforcement wouldn't be involved. The criminal behavior leading to the use of deadly force is investigated by whatever agency was already handling that matter. The use of deadly force is investigated by the IDFIT team.
Do we have anybody with generic questions?
So when, a little bit more about the investigations kept separate then? So like if you have the criminal investigation for the suspect or that, and then the other ones, so those the officers don't intermix between those two
Correct.
groups, right? Okay.
There's obviously going to be a little bit of overlap, depending on the scenario. You might have anywhere from a person stop to a long-term investigation, so there has to be a little bit of information to get how we got to that point. But yeah, they're kept separate generally. And our report package from IDFIT is its own, just on the use of the deadly force. What was investigated, what was learned, anywhere from videos to 911 logs to radio traffic, all those pieces are a complete separate investigative package.
I think a good example of that, Bill, was shortly after I arrived, early summer of 2018, we had an incident down in the 13th and Washington area where a subject stabbed and killed a homeowner and then fled on foot, and we found them and had a deadly encounter with that suspect who was armed with a knife. We had two separate investigations going concurrently. We had the homicide investigation and trying to get that locked down with our investigators running that, the violent crimes unit running that, and then the IDFIT team on board having to do the deadly force investigation. And one informs the other, but they are bifurcated so that we can have some kind of a lockbox mentality around that deadly force investigation, so that it can be as objective and as transparent as possible.
But inevitably, there's going to be a little bit of overlap. Why the officers ended up, say, at 13th and what brought them there and how they ended up at this location is directly related to the homicide.
So, because you know very much about transparency, but most people don't know that. I think that's sort of an important piece of this, because I think people think that the one group does the whole investigation. And I think somehow we need to kind of make that a little more clear, Chief. I don't know how to do that, but because I think that's an important piece to this, because I think a lot of times people think that, oh, well, this group is just justifying that thing or this, and when it's truly two separate.
That and I would say among other things that are a little bit of a misconception is that the concept of IDFIT, or how we approach deadly force investigations, is rooted in legislative law. I mean, that's that Senate Bill 111, it mandates that we have this team that does that, and so that's one piece. And when they do it, it's a criminal investigation. I mean, what they're investigating is a homicide has occurred, albeit at the hands of a law enforcement officer, but it is a homicide, and they're doing a criminal investigation, just much like they would do any other criminal investigation on homicide. And so I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding around kind of what lens they're looking at it through, but they're very much looking at it through the same lens as we look at any other homicide. We look at the facts of the case and culpability and probable cause factors and all the same thing. We gather evidence, do forensics. They do everything that you would do in a regular homicide.
So one piece on any deadly force encounter, the agency that deployed used deadly force is never the primary investigating agency. So to use, actually I don't know which agency, but on EPD's most recent use of deadly force, our investigators were not primary investigators. It's always sourced to an outside agency. Again, I think in the interest of transparency and unbiased. We will assign an investigator to be a liaison with that agency, all in one team, but inevitably when you have a use of deadly force at the Eugene Police Department, for instance, we're going to have body-worn camera, in-car video, 911 tapes, officer radio transmissions, and to have a liaison that one of our detectives can provide those to the outside agency.
So how is it assigned when an incident occurs, like in Eugene, for example? How is it assigned within the team?
So when I'll just use our most recent example. I get a call real early on, immediately, basically. We contact the county as they provide what's that system? It's basically an all-page type system. It's an automated system that goes out via phone, via text, and phone call. If you're going to respond, you press 1. We meet, it'll be me, Sergeant Fisher from Oregon State Police, Sergeant Mann from Wayne County Sheriff's Office, and we meet and identify what agency will be primary on it. It will not be the agency using deadly force, and it depends on a number of factors, including current caseload, to which agencies handled maybe the last 2 or 3. The next agency will be up to handle it.
I have what may just be irritating questions about the scope. If an officer, say, fires his gun but doesn't hit anything, that wouldn't trigger an investigation?
It would.
It would? Okay. And I assume that the serious physical injury would be any injury at all, like hit a fingertip with
Yeah,
a bullet?
and when you look at our policy, in 810 here, your question is great because it may not trigger it. And we've had, since I've been on the team, which has been 2 years and a month, we've had, I think, 2 such scenarios where one was not, and that was an outside agency shooting, not ours, and we had one that was. And as our team tactic for IDFIT outside of policy has been, if deadly force is used, whether it meets these, it's in the best interest to have an IDFIT response.
That's why I asked. I thought it would be.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something for you folks to look at in policy. It does limit these to has resulted in death or serious physical injury. What you do with the policy, of course, is not up to me. But generally, we would deploy the interagency team for the mere use of deadly force.
Good, yeah.
I have a couple questions. Can you say what the IDFIT acronym stands for again?
Interagency Deadly Force Investigations Team.
Got it, okay. That was close. And then I was curious, how are folks selected to be on that team in the different
Good
departments?
question. Which it's at our agency, it's someone assigned to the investigations division with some level of training and more in-depth investigations. Since I've taken over, we've actually gone out of maybe some of our normal, which is just violent crime detectives. We've recently brought on 2 detectives from our special investigations unit, and when that was going to happen, I requested that they be sent to a national homicide training class, which they've completed. And when they came back, I think as a sort of a prerequisite, to have that scale of training is better suited for the team.
And then my other question I was just curious about is how this team interacts with the DA's office. It's mentioned a little bit at the end of the policy.
Yeah, the DA's office is present for all deadly force, uses of deadly force. Frankly, they will send, it's often their senior major crimes attorney to the scene, and we work with them. Again, just another layer of investigative experience, identify any angles that aren't being covered, and basically another set of eyes from an attorney standpoint. Ultimately, every investigation ends up being turned over to the DA's office.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So after the criminal investigation is completed, can you talk a little bit about what the follow-up process would be with an internal investigation of any kind to see if any policies or procedures were violated?
I can touch on that. That might be more for the chief. Yeah, once the criminal piece is done from IDFIT, we step back and then.
Once the criminal piece is done and the district attorney's office has a chance to render a decision, what then happens is downstream is it triggers with the auditor's office and internal affairs an administrative review for policy violations through our system. We convene what is called a Deadly Force Review Board, which is chaired by one of the captains, and it brings in a variety of disciplines to include the auditor's office to sit in and essentially hear a presentation or go through the deliberation of looking at all of the policies and procedures and see if any of those may have been violated during the course of the entire incident. And so we're, like for instance, in our most recent shooting, we're getting ready to convene that board the first week of March, I believe. And we'll go through that and then let the IA process run its through. It's one of the interesting nuances is that in the early stages during the criminal investigation, you have certain, just like anybody does, it's going through a criminal investigation, certain rights for the individual that's being investigated, and then it switches to the kind of the administrative side, which then involves an awful lot of the union participation on the employees' rights around labor law and employment law, and so we work really closely with our labor partners in making sure that there's fair representation there. But then there's a kind of a different little nuance, is that we can compel a statement in the administrative side of this. On the criminal side, you can't compel a statement for anybody. And so we want to do the criminal side first, because then if we did it the other way around, or if we launched too soon and we compelled a statement by an officer, for instance, that admitted something, trying to be and being honest, we wouldn't be able to use that in the criminal case. It would be coerced, and we wouldn't be able to do it. So there's a logical chronology to this to get through the criminal investigation, and largely, if the criminal investigation is done really well and the entries are done really well, an awful lot of our questions that we would want to ask internally and administratively are been asked and answered, and we're able to do that. But undoubtedly, from time to time, there's a second interview that's done with the officer to better understand some of the decision making around some of the policy stuff.
Got myself next. I had a question about funding. If you guys get funding from the state, if the officers who are EPD officers and detectives are paid through EPD's budget.
I'll have to let the chief talk on some of this piece, but essentially, yeah, we will fund each piece out of our own budget. As far as, say, equipment, there really isn't any that's not agency specific, and I'm here to say EPD is the leader in technology, equipment, pieces to help us thoroughly investigate these, such as 3D scanners, forensics, whatnot, and that's funded out of our own budget. There have been recent talks about small costs involved with, say, CC reporting, which is a transcription service, and each agency is going to cover their own. So I'm probably talking too much.
No, you're fine. You're right where you need to be. We don't have a cost recovery mechanism when we go out and help another jurisdiction, and we're seen as kind of the bigger player with more resources. So we have a tendency to subsidize, quite frankly, other deadly force investigations. Under kind of this mutual aid agreement that we're all kind of helping each other. But in fairness, we also have, from time to time, the majority of the incidents happening in Eugene, and so they're coming to us probably more than we're going to them. But when we do go to them, we come with a lot of resources, and we're able to help them do really good investigations.
And that's, the chief hits on a good point, and I don't want to taint it with our use of force is bad, just due to the size of our community, the size of our department.
Yeah.
We are the biggest consumer of IDFIT, and in my opinion, the return on the investment is really good, because our amount of time we spend assisting other agencies is, quite frankly, a good trade for how much resources we get from them.
And to put it into context, the city of Eugene over the last the Deadly Force Review Board convenes anytime there's a use of deadly force, serious physical injury or death. Over the last 10 years, we've only had to convene 12 of those. So sometimes there's this we get into a moment in time where we feel like we've had a couple of incidents that seem to paint with a broad brush kind of the history of the recent history of the department. But we've only convened 12 times in the last 10 years, and not all of those resulted in death. And so I say that just to kind of set some context around how often we're doing this here in the city, at least.
Clearly, witnesses are a really important, potentially important part of this kind of thing.
Yes.
And this is ignorance, I just don't know. But suppose there were some bystanders that definitely saw what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to compel them to be witnesses? I mean, suppose they just don't want to. They don't want to be a witness.
I don't know that
How does that work?
I don't know that we could compel them, but I don't know that we've had a scenario that I've seen.
No,
where
people would normally be willing, but I'm just imagining the case in which someone's not willing. Or I just don't know what would happen there.
Well, again, thank goodness we haven't gone down that road yet.
Yeah. I suppose attempt to persuade or something.
Yeah, and I mean, usually, I think we had a scenario up in Oak Ridge back in, let's say, November, where the use of deadly force was witnessed by 6 or 7 people, some of them juveniles, of all varying. The way that the detectives handled these interviews, in my opinion, was, nothing short of compassionate. They made everybody as comfortable as you're going to be in a scenario like that. And in fact, our team has recently met after that incident to figure out how we can do that better with, say, juvenile victims of seeing seeing something they've been exposed to. So to answer your question, I really don't have an answer for it. I mean,
No experience.
no experience with it, and compelling somebody in a critical incident. We have gone out, say somebody's highly impacted by a traumatic event like that, we can go out a couple days later after they've had a chance to regroup and talk to them again, which probably happens half the time anyway.
Does it?
Yeah, because people, how it is. People
Yeah,
see something and
traumatic,
then a couple days later they may remember something different, or even recant some things.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Doug,
I have Lindsay next.
that answers it.
So a couple things. One, I appreciate in this policy, I see like several layers of officer care, which I think is really important, and I'm glad that it's explicit in the policy. It's really important to take care of our officers, so they can take care of us. The second thing, if I'm understanding correctly, it's county by county. Is that accurate?
yes,
And so if EPD is the larger jurisdiction in the county and therefore has the most, for example, probably investigatory experience and capacity, do you run up against having difficulty putting together teams that are as qualified and capable?
You're being really nice about that.
Try it.
I'll ask this question for you. When we think about people coming and investigating our use of force situations, are we concerned that we're getting investigators that are not qualified to be sitting here doing this because of the jurisdiction they work for? They don't have the experience we have.
And it's not to say anything bad against it, but the likelihood is that their experience is less just because of the size of the
I think it's a
agency
valid-
and the experience.
Correct,
And so I will my own perspective. So I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen a few of these just from the IA side sitting on the CRB, because we look at all of those that have come up recently. And my observation is that in general, seeing the quality of work that goes into EPD, IA investigations, and then comparing it sometimes, and particularly at some in the more distant past, comparing that to IDFID investigations, the IDFID investigations are not always as, they're not always as competent.
they're not as comprehensive.
And so, I mean, and that's just like from a cursory outsider's layperson perspective, and so I'm just wondering how you feel about that. Are there things that could be done to improve that? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that in my experience in my 2 years on IDFIT, I feel as though the EPD-led investigations are the most robust, comprehensive. I'm receiving positive feedback from the DA's office about the quality of the investigation, the quality of even the presentation of the investigation. And I think we're becoming, frankly, kind of setting a standard. And I'm hoping that through repeated exposures, unfortunately, that these other agencies are learning from ours, and that us being involved can offer some guidance and mentoring to them. And I think we can point at a couple of our years past IDFIT, locally based here in Lane County, that have maybe not met that standard, in my opinion.
Or, I mean, you don't have, I would agree with you.
The quality control, when you think about quality control around this, for the most part, the quality control lies solely with the district attorney's office. It's not any different than any other investigation we did. If it's him or his crew had a sexual assault or a physical assault and did an investigation and slid it across the desk of the district attorney's office, and they did an analysis and they said, you forgot to interview this witness, or I need more information here, they would kick this back and we would do a deeper investigation. That's from time to time where when an investigation goes to the DA's office, I think it's their responsibility to ask, if all the questions aren't asked and answered, that they need to do that. I think concurrently with that, as the home agency, as much as we try to stay out of it, we do have a mechanism. If there's a burning desire for us to know something more about something, we can make that request. but we try not to meddle in that investigation, because when you start blurring those lines, you can imagine how many people are concerned about whether you're directing the investigation or influencing the investigation. But the majority of the quality control with any investigation, whether it's a deadly force investigation or a burglary investigation, the DA's office is the one that has the final say on whether they think it's a complete and thorough investigation, and if it's not, they have the authority to say, do more, do this, send this to the lab, wait for this to get back for the lab, those types of things, and they will do that. And so we're kind of at the mercy of what the DA either wants or doesn't want.
So to answer a little bit of that too, a couple of our most recent, I'll use Oak Ridge again. You spend these hours out in the rain doing the investigation. We will take the entire team that's on site or anywhere, and we'll convene as a group before everybody leaves. Everybody can then say, I did this, I talked to this person. So you can identify if any angles are coming up short. The team will again reconvene generally the next day, and that will usually have a representative from the DA's office, usually Eric Hasselman or Patty Pillow, and they can look at what's happening so far. And I think we've got some pieces now in place to help make sure that we're not missing something, because I think, let's just call it as we see it, there's been pieces missed in the past, some pretty bold ones. And having that mix of people, and when you're separating days and days, and then there's yet another meeting with all the involved investigators with an attorney to again say, here's where we're at now, and then the DA can guide kind of where they see those voids at. And in my opinion, it's working well right now. And again, I think with us as the benchmark of the investigations, the other people are being brought up to that level.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, so Commissioner Davey asked really, I think his question had a lot of merit about getting statements from witnesses. And in some scenario, you will have maybe, witnesses who are not willing to provide information because they fear, they see the police, they see people with badges, then they instantly get turned off from that, because they number one, they may be a gang member who witnessed another gang member who, supposedly got, mistreated by the officer, so then they would not be willing to step up and provide the information. Or in some community, you might have, for example, a newly immigrated Asian, person who has, limited English speaking ability, or back home, back in, in their old country, they do not cooperate with the police, because when you do, you're instantly seen by the community, by the rest of the community, your neighbors, your, other people on the street. They look at you and they go, you're an informer, because they don't hear the conversation. So then how do you mitigate all that, obstacles? Because the information could be very pertinent.
Absolutely.
That they can provide.
And I have yet to see, first of all, that occur, or a detective say, oh, they just don't want to talk to me. We're not going to wrestle someone down. The way I've seen most of our interviews go is, in this room, it'd be like, oh, Chief, could you talk to Mr. Mackey here? And everything is separate to make it a little less, we would never interview everybody all together. First of all, that jeopardizes the integrity of their statement. Right. And try and make people be a little bit more comfortable in not being right there in a scene talking. These typically occur in a detective's cars. Let's warm up, do you need anything? So far, I've felt the detectives and investigators have done a good job acknowledging any type of resistance the individual may have, even despite seeing such a traumatic event. Or we all know that there's many members of our community that have, I'm not going to talk to you guys, or you just shot my friend. Even the most recent EPD one, seeing 3 detectives follow around an involved party for 10 minutes, doing some de-escalation and some calming, was absolutely effective, and we got a quality interview with her. So it's hard for me to answer that, being that we haven't gone through it, and that I'm confident in the compassion and patience of the investigators, And surely we'll go down that road, and surely other agencies, say in, like a Portland Metro that has more of that mentality where an officer uses deadly force and they've got a different segment of society, they're probably running into that more than we are. And, that might be something that as a team for our training, we could vet that. We have quarterly training through our team and identify ways we can be better or training we need.
Okay, thank you.
Sweet. Well, we are almost out of time, so I wanted to thank you for coming and answering the questions. And we have time for one last question if anybody has one. But other than that,
I don't have a dog.
Then I guess we can let you leave early.
I'll just make one comment if you have just like a moment. I
Yes.
think you sort of allude to this, the perceived need for maybe more trauma-informed interviewing training, and I would say that's always a good idea. Whether you're talking about juveniles or other crime victims, the more trauma-informed interview training you can have, I think the better.
In fact, we just got a posting today for some trauma-related interviewing in Bend in April.
Super.
And I'm going to see if I can get the boss to buy a couple of those. Sorry, Chief.
Sounds like a recommendation from the police commission.
All right.
Thank you so
Sergeant.
much.
Thanks, Tim.
Have a great one. All right, we are on to the chief's report.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll keep my remarks short, and I'm going to sneak out afterwards and turn it over to Sergeant Smith. You guys got that? It's the night of the sergeants, which is good for you. I mean, I would say I would encourage you anytime you have questions about how we do business, why we do business, the operations of the department, your first stop should be with having the sergeants come and talk to you, because they are absolutely the layer of the organization that is so critical to the way we act, behave, the morale. They're the frontline supervisors. They're involved. They're involved with everything, and I'm pleased to say that we have a Sergeants Academy, or a Sergeants Training Day coming up in April. It's an all-day leadership curriculum specifically for them that has a variety of things, to include some more training and some exposure to some explicit bias types of things, so that they can have that good training and help with their officers, and we try to get that out to the department. So we're working on that, but the sergeants are the ones that really have the information, and they do a great job when they come and just talk to you about what it really is like out there dealing with public safety in this community and the types of people that we have doing this. Lindsay, you're absolutely right. We're young. It's like fielding a freshman team. Super enthusiastic, but making lots of mistakes. And so we know that. And so I think that's why we've been thoughtful around revamping our training curriculum and the training delivery model. And we have a lieutenant, a sergeant, and five full-time trainers now that are just looking at making sure we can get people trained. And then so important that the FTOs that really shepherd them through their different phases of training are not only teaching them how to do good police work, but teaching them kind of the culture of this city, the culture of this department, and how the two need to mirror each other. And as you're young, that's more and more difficult, because ideally, when I first started, your FTOs, your field training officers, were these very experienced, wise men and women that have kind of been around the block. And right now, a lot of our FTOs are much younger than we've had in the past, and that's by necessity, just to be able to get them through training. So we're very cognizant of that. We're trying to pay attention to that. I know the deputy chief is very aware operationally of some of the vulnerabilities around our age. That's not going to change in the foreseeable future. We are fully staffed in the general fund, I'm making 5 or 6 job offers to start in early April that will fully fund whatever of the community safety initiative we've been allowed to fill. And so that all wrapped into the CSI is your street crimes team, some CSOs, dispatchers, some additional officers, 3 additional officers that we'll be hiring, 2 more CSOs, so for a total of 7 total so far, and then another support person here inside. So we're at a place where we're able to get really good candidates. I met with 2 candidates yesterday, 2 great candidates. I was very, very happy that both candidates were in other processes, but they want to work here. We're their first choice, and so we moved some things around, and they got to me. And like I've said before, nobody gets a job offer unless they meet with me face to face. I want to see people. I want to talk to people. I want to. There's a thing that goes along with all of us where you just kind of have a sense of character. You just need to meet somebody to know that and ask them some tough questions sometimes. And so we did that. But 2 great candidates. And so we're moving down that path. We've got 15 in background, and for the first time in I don't know how long, we're not going to be able to take them all. We're just going to take the best and the brightest, the 5 best and brightest. 2 already are spoken for, another 3 we'll grab, and then the rest will sit on a list. And so my guess is we'll probably lose them to somebody else if they're as talented as I think they are. But we're just in a place, we're in kind of a waiting place right now, while the city and the software vendor start to gear up the administrative side of collecting the Community Safety Initiative payroll tax. The city's getting ready to send its first flyers to businesses to start doing some of that outreach. We recognize that the success of this hinges on the percentage of collection that we're going to get. We're really trying to hit a high target right out of the gate, and so part of that is making it easily understandable and easy to administer and easy to calculate for businesses, so that they don't have any excuse other than to pay their tax. And so we're going to work on some significant community outreach between now and what we believe to be a drop dead date, or the latest date would be January 1 of 2021 when we start collecting. And so when we start collecting that money, will be kind of the next part of really starting to make some hiring, and it'll be big chunks at a time as we start to gear up. I want to get people on board and trained and in place and settled into what we're doing, so that we can perform and see if we're able to accomplish what I think we can accomplish with more dispatchers and more police officers and more CSOs and more record specialists and more support staff to support the mission. And so that's kind of the road we're going down right now, and one of our big focuses will be on that. We've recently moved within the general fund some things. We've selected a recruiting officer, Kara Williams. She's now in our recruiting. She is going to be attending an expo up in Portland that we've been invited to for the first time ever, that is specifically designed to recruit women in law enforcement. So we're really excited about an opportunity to kind of penetrate that market and really look at some continued meaningful attention to our diversity recruitment, especially around gender. And so Kara's going to be a great addition to that, and she's really excited. And I think we're going to be able to do some neat things there. And so the pieces are in place for us to be able to grow and be a better organization at the end of this. But I'm mindful of the growing pains that we're going to have doing it. It's a good problem to have, but it's a problem nevertheless. And so we're trying to pay attention to those things. So with that, let me stop there and see if there's any couple questions I can answer, if there are any.
Don't have any myself, and it looks like you were.
I have questions.
Sure.
I always have questions. Are a lot of the people coming in laterals, or no? These are just all new.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's a really good question. We try to balance it a little bit. We run concurrent recruitment, so entry level and lateral. We're at about a kind of a 3-to-1 ratio. It feels like 3 entry level to 1 lateral. Laterals are kind of a unicorn. Good laterals are a unicorn because it means they're not running from something, and they don't come to us with a lot of bad habits. Those are the 2 things. And I'm not sure we got this memo, but Eugene's a unique place to police in, and it doesn't translate very well from other parts of the country, quite frankly. And so we have to take a look at that. The key for all of our hiring, whether it's lateral, entry level, is you have some of the most robust background investigations that happen that I've seen anywhere. The amount of just financial resources we put towards allowing investigators to go on site and ask these questions. I read a background on one of the candidates yesterday that I met, and there was 36 different people in that person's sphere of influence that we talked to and interviewed about the character of this person. They are very, very comprehensive, and so we really, really pay attention with laterals because of that. Most of the laterals we're getting are coming here for a reason. There's family here, they're from here, so I'm pleased that there's a reason for them coming back. It's not just, I'm running from something and I want to land in Eugene and it just happened to be on the, a job opening. So we're really, really careful about grabbing laterals that are coming for the right reasons. But it's about a 3-to-1 ratio. They get on the road and start helping out much faster, as you can imagine. They don't have to spend 16 weeks in the academy, and their field training program usually is accelerated. It can expand and contract based on their needs. And so we would not be able to do what we need to do if it wasn't for some of the good laterals that we get.
Thank you both. Any other questions before we get out of here?
All right, thank you. I'm bailing on you, Julie.
All right.
She's the
utility player.
She's the smart one out of the bunch, anyway. This is the glue that holds us together downtown.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good job.
Anyone need a break? Are you guys okay? You want to power through?
Yeah.
Bye, Chief.
So I believe it starts on page 16, and you can go in any order you want. I know the homeless services might be a little bit more of a discussion if we want to save that till the end.
Great. Sure.
Yeah.
I had talked with Jeremy earlier in the day. It was kind of the last minute, but I was wondering, did we happen to get a map of what the downtown area by any chance?
I do not have it down. No,
Yeah.
I do not have it down.
The reason I bring that up is because I think it's important that you guys understand some of the boundary areas. So one is, let me start by explaining the boundaries to the downtown patrol boundaries. And I think the other boundary that is important to note is the downtown activity zone boundary. So there are 9 police officers assigned to the downtown team. And 2 supervisors. We've added some, increased the footprint to the downtown team and added 2 additional community service officers to the team to bring a total of 3. So we have a station manager and 2 field community service officers in addition to the 9 officers. This year for schedules, we added back our nighttime services, and so from Wednesday through Saturday night, we have officers coming on from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning to help cover that shift that was vacated in 2017, I think. So our patrol boundaries go from 5th Avenue to 15th Avenue and from Lincoln Street to High Street. So it's just kind of a big box. So when we talk over to spill over into the neighborhoods, I felt it was important that we understand what are the patrol boundaries of the downtown team so that we can discuss as to what neighborhoods there might be a concern towards. So the downtown activity zone is a much little smaller box, but I mention it because there are additional ordinances that are enforced in the downtown activity zone which aren't applicable to other areas of the city of Eugene. And that, and let's see if I can do it by memory, but I'm pretty sure it's 6th Avenue to 11th Avenue from Oak Street to Lincoln Street.
To what?
To Lincoln Street.
Lincoln.
So it's a little smaller box within the middle of the patrol boundaries for the officers.
What sort of additional ordinances are in place there that affect your work?
There are, one of the biggest ones is there's under 4.872, which is called Downtown Acts Prohibited. There are a number of line items that apply to that area. And if we kind of go back in history a little bit, in the 1960s, maybe early 70s, when they created the pedestrian mall, it was a closed pedestrian mall, and they created, over the years, many ordinances to try to deal with troubled behaviors in that area. And so the downtown activity zone, although the mall is no longer a closed pedestrian mall, the downtown activity zone is still in effect and still applies. And so if you want to know what kind of things are, I think there's like, it's probably a page and a half, but are things like you can't climb and hang a hammock or be in a tree. You can't be in planting areas. So I mean, it's things like those things that aren't necessarily applicable outside of that downtown activity zone. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, so I think one of the concerns is with the increased presence in downtown, are we pushing or displacing some of the behaviors into the outlying neighborhoods? And so I regularly meet with security partners that patrol the Midtown area, which is essentially like the 11th to 13th all the way to the West University area. And I check in with them every month to see, are we experiencing a displacement when we enact new ordinances? So 2 years ago, the city council passed the dog registration, and we were concerned that we would push people who have dogs out into the outside of that boundary area, which in fact is a separate boundary than the downtown activity zone and the patrol boundary and the downtown core. And we didn't see that. So, I'm happy to say that the contract security services that we have did not see a displacement or an increase in those behaviors or people with dogs in those areas to be affected. Conversely, also with the smoking boundary, which is an ordinance which is very hard to implement because of the sheer nature of the way it's worded, and then also because of we allow people to opt in and opt out. So we have a smoking restriction, but yet if a business wants to opt out of the restriction, anybody standing in front of that business can be smoking there legally. And it's very hard for the public to both understand where people can and can't smoke. At any rate, if there's something that I wish would happen, is would be a change in the language to that to make it easier to enforce, and that would be, rather than having all these opt-in and opt-outs at different times of the day, is to simply say that between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. at night, there is no smoking, but after 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., people can smoke downtown. So that would help with the clientele for the bars, which who were the main stakeholders that were worried that it would affect their business. So, okay, so does anyone have questions about the spillover into the neighborhoods? So I don't have a formal report for you. We could certainly have crime analysis do a formal report, but that would take more time than I could go over and get it done today. So.
Yeah. Let's do B.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with the contract security that you were mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Were they just, security guards that were hired in lieu of having officers there? Is that what it is? Or can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think it's a contract security. I think currently ASI has that security bid, and it's actually a group of businesses in the Midtown area assembled together, and they actually pay for those security officers to focus on their businesses, to give more presence and to help mitigate. They feel like it's easier to have a contract security person to come up to somebody and say, hey, you can't be here, versus themselves having to go outside of their business and say, you can't be sitting here, kind of thing.
Okay.
So the contract security company still contacts the police if there's an issue that escalates to the level. They don't have arrest powers. They're simply mainly observe and report.
Yeah.
So does that kind of
Thanks.
help out?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, so they're paid out of the businesses themselves.
Thank you.
My question was also about the contracted security folks, rather than the spillover issue. And that's just if something goes wrong, there's a lot of accountability when it comes to our officers. Are you aware of any sort of does the auditor deal with any individual security complaints and that kind of thing?
Not that I know of, because they're not a city entity.
We only have jurisdiction over Eugene.
Yeah.
We get complaints about other companies, we discuss them.
And on occasion, some of the, and I would have to say in the 4.5 years that I've been downtown, there have been very few, but complaints that have come through about a certain security guard or a certain situation that occurred. And then I go directly to the management of the security company and relay that information, and then therefore, since that's their employees, they take on the complaint and do a process through their own company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Okay, so do you want, are you guys comfortable with the spillover into the neighborhoods discussion? Okay.
No, we're going to talk about guardian trailers next.
Yeah, we can go to Guardian Trailers next. So I'm happy to report that we've been deploying them a lot and frequently, and we found that when they're deployed in those locations that it's effective in deterring the behaviors and actually recording the footage of any criminal events that happen when they are. I'd have to say that I didn't realize the amount of staffing time that it takes to maintain them and deploy them. And so the good news is they're very effective. The bad news is it takes a lot of staff time to maintain them and deploy them. So we are using them citywide. They're not just only focused downtown, although we try to make sure that we make one always available for any areas in the downtown that's needed. We make that a priority. But we've deployed them for several different circumstances, everything from problem locations where we might have businesses that are concerned about people smoking and questionable behaviors, all the way to areas where there's new development going on and there might be theft and burglaries occurring on those properties, and so we've been able to deploy them to help deter that. So, yes.
That. So I'm new, so you probably told the group this before, but for the Guardian trailers, do you have folks review the footage, or just only if there's been an incident?
Both. We have, depending on the location, sometimes we have people monitor live video. And but then obviously if there is a criminal incident, we have somebody that actually reviews, tries to narrow down the time frame and actually reviews the footage, the entire footage, to find the criminal incident that occurred.
And then I have a second question. Do you deploy them anywhere on the bike paths?
We actually, I can say that so that Eugene Police Department has 3 Guardian trailers. The Parks Department actually purchased a 4th camera, and it's purely deployed in the parks and problem areas. So not all the bike paths are part of the parks, unfortunately. But they try to deploy them in areas that citizens report concerns through Park Watch or complaints that come in, that we try to deploy them to help deter some of the behaviors that are happening. So they've been effective at that. Yes. So one of the outcomes to having the camera trailers is that we found that we were deploying them in the same spots frequently because they would be effective. We'd pull them out to deploy them somewhere else, and those behaviors would return to those locations. So what we looked at from a downtown operations standpoint, meaning that the bigger team that kind of focuses on downtown safety, is that we looked and agreed, based on input from some city councilors, is that we actually have 3 cameras that will be stationary, full-time, hardwired cameras. And so currently, 1 out of the 3 is installed and active, and that is at Broadway and Olive. There is one that's going to be installed on the southeast corner of the library that faces the Kiva parking lot and the area, both east and west down the alleyway. And that one, the hardware is installed, but it's not actively recording yet. And then the last location is going to be at Broadway and Willamette, Kesey Square. Yes.
Do you make it obvious, because at the same time you want it to have, some kind of deterrence effect, but then on the other hand, you also want to catch people doing the bad things. It's kind of like a two-sided coin, right? So do you tend to make those more visible, more obvious, or do you kind of hit it, or what?
They're very overt, they're very obvious. So what I want to say is that we helped with some of the funding for the hard installation, but the cameras are being maintained and run by the parking services. And we, the Eugene Police Department, will only have access to the footage when we have a criminal event. But the cameras are very overt looking. I mean, they kind of poke out from the side of the building. And there is also signage to go around with it to make people know that there is actually a camera there.
Okay.
So kind of both. We hope that it deters, makes people feel safer, and with the knowledge that it's there, that maybe they won't do the behaviors that...
There are probably reasons not to do this, but the police department employs dummy cars for traffic. It wouldn't cost very much to make a dummy trailer with the stock, and like a couple $1,000s would do that, I'll bet.
We could.
And it sounds like just the presence of it.
The presence of it helps.
Is a strong deterrent.
I'd have to say that we do. They do suffer some damage. They get spray painted a lot. We've had one of the solar panels be destroyed and had to replace that at like a couple of $1,000s cost to replace the solar panel. And then they need to be maintained, and when I say maintained, they need to be fueled, and they need, because they run continuously, they need an oil change like every month, so.
Wow.
Anyway, those are some things that we didn't, going into it, that we didn't expect, and so you almost need a dedicated staff, as that's part of their job duties to. And right now, it's falling on the downtown team and the.
So do they run on a generator?
They both have, yes, they have generator, and then we do have the ability to deploy the solar panels so that it doesn't run on the generator, except for that, depending on the location, it's not very smart.
So now
to put out
the dummy camera's going to be more expensive than I thought, because that's not going to work, I guess.
Yeah, does everyone feel okay with cameras now?
Yeah, that's good.
I was going to ask
Yes.
the permanent ones that have been installed by the library. Are they encased, somehow secured? Because I know stealing cameras, there's quite a deal in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so the location, and I've been told as of Wednesday that they are installed there. I hadn't noticed them. But if you look, they're at the very top of the corner of the building. There's no way that anybody can scale the side of the building to get to that location.
Just a quick comment, if that's okay. I'm going to piggyback on your question about the effectiveness of maybe having, some dummy cameras, because obviously they're very costly, and these trailers I'm talking about, and to have the dummy ones. The comment I'm going to make is that I can see how that can kind of backfired. Because once the criminals have discovered that was a dummy camera, they're going to question all the other cameras, whether they're real or not, and we don't want that, I think they could probably push it or something from behind and get a feel that it's not the same weight, I think they're pretty clever at that. I personally, I have cameras up in my house, around my house, but...
Dummies?
Well, no. I bought some dummy ones. This is just a little side note. I bought some dummy ones, but then I went to a seminar that talk about security and all that, and the security experts that don't use dummy ones. Because if you have an incident for the police, for example, when you have a real incident that happened and you have a civilian nearby, and they're like, there's footages right there. You know, the police, the EPD have to have recorded this footage, and then there isn't any if it's a dummy camera. So there's a lot of negative side to having it, aside from saving, you know, the cost. I think it's really, that's just my personal opinion, I don't think it's worth saving in that sense.
Right. There is a liability and expectation of the public that if they see a camera there, that somebody's either monitoring or recording the footage. So that would be my concern too. So these cameras, as I said, we did facilitate some funding to help with the hardwire, but we are not going to be maintaining them. Parking services will be, but it was kind of on the coattails that they have programmed their parking structures to have cameras in them. So both the parking structure at 10th and Oak and at 7 and Willamette are fully staffed now with cameras on each floor. And they're working towards getting the funding to finish the installation on the Broadway Place parking structures. So anyway, okay. You're welcome. And then let's move to drug enforcement and court. So this is a great opportunity to kind of let you know that we're really working on trying to make the verbiage for court a little bit simpler. And so I think that you're going to hear me refer to it as the EPD outreach team, because many times people confuse court with the real word court for municipal or circuit court. So we are working on rebranding that and getting that information out and using the verbiage EPD outreach just to make it simpler. So just to kind of refresh for those that have heard this before, but then to new members, is that the EPD outreach functions 2 days a week, 10 hours a week. And although we do focus our time, because it's actually staffed out of my downtown team, we do respond across the city-wide on referrals, both in the parks and from other areas of town where officers refer people to the services. So initially we started downtown focusing on the frequent utilizers, and we were happy with the results that when we're working with these individuals that we reduced the recidivism by 90%. And so once the results were seen after the first year, they asked me to increase the services to citywide and especially to the parks, the park area, because we had park resource officers, and so we deploy them at referral from them. What we found is very interesting, though, is that we would receive clients from areas in the far west of town. So, and there's a park out off of Green Hill and Royal called like Meadowlark or Meadow something. So it takes about 20 or 30 minutes to drive out there. And then we'd work with the client and we'd set up appointments. But what we found is that the clients that were further away from the core, further west, is that they didn't want to come downtown for services. They didn't follow up with any of their appointments. And what they, in debriefing with them, is that they indicated that they were familiar with their surroundings in the area that they had found, and they were able to obtain services closer to them, and so they didn't. It wasn't as successful as it was in the downtown area. So we do it by referral, but it is harder because the clients are more resistant to actually getting some of the help that they need. But I'm happy to say that the city is actually getting ready and hiring employees right now to launch their mobile outreach team. And that will consist of one staff kind of as a supervisor position plus 3 outreach workers that will be going out into the field. I think Monday through Friday, I think, is going to be And so they may overlap with us, which is great, but they'll have more hours and more days of the week that we'll be able to do outreach with the clients. So I know that there was some concern that the outreach was only happening downtown and not reaching others in the community that may need the help. But we are trying to fill that gap. Let's see, what else? I think you guys, I don't know if you've heard, but they're working towards the Day Resource Center, which is going to be limited hours of the day, but it will be designed for people to reach services and work through the navigation of the social services that are available in town. And on the coattails of that, the city's still looking and have narrowed it down to 2 locations for a navigation center, which will be a transitional housing center. And I think they're shooting for 75 beds for that. So the Day Resource Center will not be an overnight center and not be really a location for people to hang out all day, but it will be an access point for them to be able to get to resources. And access mentors and peers that will help them navigate services.
So I have a question about the mobile outreach team and its efficacy if traveling away from the city center hasn't been effective because of the trip it would require these folks to take on their own. Won't the mobile outreach team run into the same problems?
They could. I think the hope is that that through the peer and mentorship and then being available more days of the week, that they'll be able to hopefully give them a warm handoff to the services to be able to help them through that, and having the additional transitional housing and community supported housing that's coming available with the MLK project, that we're hoping to filter more people through and get them on a better path. For example, right now we have 4 Conestoga huts that EPD sponsored. We purchased the Conestoga huts and we case manage them. So right now we have 3 at 2nd and Chambers Fire Training Center, Police and Fire Training Center, and 1 at the church at 1390 Pearl. And we utilize that as a transitional port for individuals, and in the last 9 months we've managed to get 12 people through the 4 huts that we have out, and 10 out of the 12 are now in permanent housing. So that's just an example of of how only 4 huts and we've been able to help 12 people in that time frame. And in fact, I just received an email before I came to this meeting. We're putting 3 more out first week of March at the Expressway rest stop. So there's an existing rest stop there, but we're actually going to add 3 APD-sponsored huts side by side to the existing rest stop there, which will then allow us to transition additional clients through that. So. Anyway, I'm very happy with the outcomes of the Conestoga huts, and so.
The little huts marked so that you can tell they're EPD sponsored?
We don't know. We don't mark them. We've done some media releases on it, so I think the ultimate goal is to be part of the bigger solution.
Sure.
In any part that we can, and we're hoping that. By the community seeing that even the police department's willing to kind of look outside of the box for solutions, that they'll become more involved in wanting to get some huts on maybe some of their property, and we are now seeing that happen. I have just in the last couple weeks I have 2 different entities, one another church and then another private corporation that wants to offer their an undeveloped piece of land to be able to put some huts on. So, yeah, I think it's a good direction.
Seems like it.
All right, so does everybody feel good about?
There's one question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have so many questions today. So peers, I'm super familiar with. You mentioned mentors, though. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this is the mobile outreach team is going to be run through the city manager's office. Peter, and I have a really hard time with his last name, Chavez, yes. Is the lead on that project. So I just mentioned it that we're working towards getting coverage more days of the week. So I don't want to, because I don't want to speak out of turn that I'm not leading that project, but they are, working with me in communication to try to make sure that what has worked, that they're employing that in their framework rather than starting from the very beginning.
Okay. The reason I asked is I was meeting with, I can't remember his name, Josh at, can't remember the name of the church either, but they do a breakfast and they see about 300 or 400 folks, and he was mentioning his leadership team is looking for opportunities to fill like policy gaps, working with homeless folks, and he was talking about possibly offering like their congregation to be able to mentor folks who are homeless, and so I could give you more information later. Maybe we could connect, or I could direct you your way or something.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, at 1390 Pearl site, the church is actively involved with mentoring the clients that go through that hut, and we very carefully try to vet the specific clients to the site so that it's successful for both the site host and the client. And so in fact, that church is very happy with the success and they're trying to lobby to get the church next door to them to also become involved in.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will filter
Awesome.
information to Peter and. All right, so we're moving through this, right? How are we doing for time? Everybody okay?
I just want to point out that you're going from court to EPOT in the name of your team.
To okay.
Police outreach team.
Yes.
I'm not sure you've improved it, but.
Well, I'm going to get away from using the acronym and just say EPD outreach. Just simple. Okay, so I think the reason why I left it to last was the homeless services category, because it kind of was more involved. And so let's start with restrooms. So as you know, restroom has been a complicated issue in the downtown area for a very long time. If we go back in history, we had 2 restrooms in both the parking structures, and those were eventually closed for lots of reasons. One is that they were being damaged continually. People were just vandalizing the equipment, and so they were having to replace the equipment over and over and over again. There were also some criminal behavior and some victimization of people because of the location is very hidden, I guess, secretive. It allowed for behaviors to happen without a lot of eyes and activities around it. So those were closed, which left a big gap in services needed for human beings. What people don't realize is that the LTD itself, on a daily, Monday through Friday, approximately 20,000 people come through the transfer center there. Wow. And then you take into consideration the employers, the businesses down there that employ staff is in probably roughly about another 1,600 people. And then on top of that, you have, visitors and people utilizing the services, right? So there is a high volume of individuals that are downtown at all times, especially Monday through Friday during business hours. A little bit less on the weekends because the services are closed, and then there's reduced services with LTD. So over the years, we've tried placing temporary bathrooms in the form of bucks, toilets in different individual locations to try to service the public so that they would have. And unfortunately, what we end up seeing is that they tend to be most people that business people and will not use them. And then they tend to be, we suffer something, people use them for IV drug use. Unfortunately, prostitution and human trafficking type behaviors. And then ultimately also camping and living in them. So we have an increased need for constant servicing of them, and a lot of complaints from citizens surrounding where the restrooms are placed. So if I had $1 for every conversation and meeting I've been about restrooms downtown, I probably could have retired already. So, but we are trying to work through it. You know, we just had deployed some temporary restrooms out again in three locations. So we had the restroom behind the library, which is situated between the Kiva Market and the library. And then we reopened one of the restrooms at the Over Park, which is at 10 and Oak. And then we had the Park Blocks restroom. And recently, about 2 weeks ago, we had to close the Kiva one and the Over Park one. Unfortunately, the Over Park, we were seeing human trafficking behaviors, but the toilet was being clogged up on a daily basis, multiple times a day, by people flushing needles down the toilet. And we tried installing needle boxes, but they were removing the needle boxes from the wall. And so, for the safety of the public, we closed down that one, which then increased the amount of people usage on the bathroom between the library and the Kiva, and ultimately, based on complaints and criminal behavior, and we had to close that one.
Are there ways to circumvent people flushing needles and stuff like that they shouldn't be flushing down? I mean, there has to be better technology than what we've been using for as long as I remember. The toilet has not changed. I mean, maybe there is some kind of netting, or I don't know. I mean, you know, something that would prevent objects that shouldn't be in there from going in there.
I wish I had the patent on that, or the knowledge to fix that, because it would
Assign
be.
magnets to that.
Yeah.
A magnet? Yeah, that might work.
Certain magnet. So what we did do is we installed, we did install a needle box. I'm probably using the wrong name for it. A needle exchange
you're right.
box. Yes,
Yeah,
a needle
yeah,
drop
drop
box at 10 and Oak. And so that just, it took me 2 years to get that installed. And you know, there was a lot of, I'd have to say, apprehension on the parts of both
Business
city
owners.
Employees and businesses about what are we doing, putting a box there. And I think they had an assumption that all these terrible things were going to happen. But I'd rather have needles placed in the drop box rather than getting the calls for service and having children pick up needles. It just went in a few months ago, and I think, would you like to kind of talk about how much on average? I'm going to open the floor to Amanda, because I worked through with Amanda to get it installed there, so.
So we service the boxes. So I work at HIV Alliance, so we service the boxes. So I have staff that go out and service them. So we placed wall-mounted sharps containers in the bathrooms. And, you know, that's sort of a new thing for us that we've been trying, because we do find that folks are more likely to use those than to carry the syringes out. Put them, so the drop box that she's talking about, they're about that big. They're big, metal, black. I think I might have a picture on my phone somewhere, but we have them around towns. We have one in Springfield at the library. There's one at Whitebird, Washington Jefferson Park.
There's one at MLK and Coburg Road right
Yeah,
there.
by the 76. We have one at my office. We have one. They're really sturdy. They're really robust. They're pretty difficult to break into. Every once in a while, we'll have one broken into where it's essentially looks like someone like crowbarred it. I mean, they're pretty tough to get into. They're metal. But we've been trying the wall-mounted ones in the bathrooms because they tend to be utilized a little bit more. But the problem is that they're easier to rip off the walls, and you're in a room by yourself, so you can spend some time really getting into that thing. Usually, what we find, folks are trying to get into it because they're hoping there's something good left in somebody's shot. So
Really?
yeah. So we
That's true.
yeah.
Really?
So we do syringe exchange to interrupt the spread of disease. That doesn't help interrupt the spread of disease when folks are doing that. So, so like I said, we've been trying it, but that one is challenging. So we still have the metal box downtown. Utilization of that box so far has been lower than the ones in the restrooms, but now that the ones in the restrooms aren't accessible or are down, closed, and all that, then we're thinking that'll build up. But anything with this population takes a long time to build trust. So folks it just will take time. People, have lots of trust concerns. It's a trap, or it's being filmed, or I'm being watched, or whatever. So it takes time.
Which kind of leads me on the path is that we had a discussion with Amanda about kind of maybe utilizing technology and data that's already being collected to kind of drive the story on whether or not we need to have an additional drop box downtown. We still have been having calls for service for needles that are just, there's right across the street at the atrium flower bed, there's needles being discarded there. And so, anyway, that's on my list of things to do, to contact crime analysis and kind of see if they could map for me where we're getting the calls for service for needles that are found on the street. But I think that we could maybe even take it a step further and look at where in the city are we experiencing overdoses, and maybe there's some education and prevention that can be done in those areas. So that's on my list of things to do, not necessarily in my job description, but I feel strongly that that would help make downtown safer, and I'd rather have control of disease, but also not have the needles just being discarded for the wrong people to come in contact with them. So that's kind of about restrooms and needle box. So we're still working through the restroom combination on what's the right source. I am happy to say that I'm involved in the architectural planning for both the park blocks remodel and the farmers block. And so there is in the plans to have an open public restroom that's going to be open 24 hours a day, as well as a restroom inside a closed building that will be accessible during when the farmers market is open.
Didn't you try for a while having sort of manned restrooms?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested in.
Okay, so we have been super successful when we actually have somebody monitor the restroom 24 hours a day. We have we see less instances of criminal behaviors, and when we look at the park blocks is where we've been able to do that. We had the little portable trailer restroom when it was manned 24 hours a day with a phone number for people to call. It was heavily used, and it was we had very few instances of needles and criminal behavior inside of it. When we tried to just have the 3 locations open 24 hours a day and had loose monitoring, meaning we hired a security person to go to all 3 bathrooms throughout the night while they patrolled the parking structures, it just was not as successful. They're trying to incorporate that data in the planning for the public restroom and the park blocks, and they're really trying to find other mechanisms to get an additional restroom in the downtown area somewhere. Very expensive to monitor them 24 hours a day, and very expensive to maintain. So I think we're really looking for a permanent solution. And it's not just us that are suffering with this complication. Other cities across the nation are also having the same complications. So I don't know, that doesn't make you guys feel better, but it is. It's obviously a need, but how can we be successful? And
in the 90s, San Francisco installed these cylindrical type public bathrooms, with doors that kind of slide like that, and you have to operate it with a coin. And I think there's a time limit where it would either beep, and I've never used this, I don't really know, but if you go in there, you're given like 5 minutes. After that, it will sound annoying and it will drive you out of there. Yeah, I mean, that's, and as far as like who gets to use it, I mean, if somebody is, on the street and is in a house, they could probably be given these coins to use it, or maybe a passcode or something.
Yeah, we'll pass some of these good suggestions. We had looked at the Portland Loo model, which, is kind of open from the shins down, and so that it could be visible if you're in there. We'd actually got permission to move forward on that, but put the brakes on it because somebody else didn't agree with the decision. So that's when we decided to try the temporary portable bathrooms again. Although we knew it wasn't successful before, we thought we'd try it again, and it wasn't successful again.
Are you talking about porta potties? I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. I never thought that restrooms would be part of my job description, but again, so.
Or to have a garden.
Academy
No, and I still don't think they have it in the academy. Okay, so
that's a good question.
Yeah.
Sorry, for the staffing of the bathrooms, like, how intense is that? Is that someone actually in the room or like outside, like by the door, or?
No, the model was really successful of having a park host, and so it was just somebody to be in the park just to welcome individuals, remind them of the rules, and then the park host would unlock the door for them and let them use the restroom, and then when the person left, they would just lock it. And so, yes, nobody inside the bathroom with them, and nobody standing out waiting for them, but generally in the area. So when we went to the monitoring, we hired additional hours for the staff that was already patrolling the parking structures, and added it on to their job duties to go check the restrooms at the 3 locations. And so with that, the doors were always left unlocked, and then they would just go and make sure to monitor that everything was okay in each of the restrooms, which was a failure.
Yeah.
Why not install a screen outside, where the person who approached the door, the user who approaches the door, can interact with the person remotely who's monitoring these different bathrooms all at once, and you have kind of like a security screen where there's multiple, screens within the screen, right? And that person who enters the bathroom would be seen by that person because it's recorded or something, and then if they don't leave, then you can press a button or send somebody there. I mean, that would eliminate having a person physically standing there or going from one bathroom to another, because it's tedious. And
Right.
yeah, and it probably costs less to have these, integrate technologies into this, I think.
Yeah, that's it's interesting to try to leverage technology to help with this solution.
Yeah, you might want to look at Japan, because I think Japan has something like that, already, because they also deal with a population that are unhoused too. For me, I came from San Francisco, where I've seen toilet papers with human waste, all over, and I think this is a solution, part of the solution in getting people from, defecating on a sidewalk to using a facility. And it's important, doesn't matter where you come from with your philosophy about why people are homeless or why they are unhoused. I think the basic necessity, at least, is to give them the dignity to have somewhere to go when they have to go, when nature calls.
Yeah, I agree. In trying to find the right solution, the right combination that works for everyone has been difficult. I'm not sure before I retire that we'll have that solved. So, but I can think positive and hope. So one of the other, I think, I was looking at this is public dumpsters, and so I can't speak to locations that, whether or not we've supplied public dumpsters. I can say that from my experience is that we have several garbage receptacles downtown, and our facilities department is tasked with cleaning them out and, removing the debris. And so what we found is that the debris gets spread all over the place every night, and so every morning it's like Groundhog Day. Facilities goes through and is picking up. And so what's happening is that there are lots of garbage cans around downtown, and what people are going through them to dig out cans, bottles, and food remnants and cigarettes. And so I think that the city has purchased new garbage cans to install so that the lids, you can't get into them. It will restrict from access to them as far as being able to take stuff out. You could put stuff in. And I think those are I think they ordered them and they'll be installed soon. Our Public Works Department spends a great deal of time responding to locations and picking up debris. I don't know, I know that they've collected the data, and I don't have those numbers, but it blows my mind the amount of debris that is collected on a monthly basis. So both from public streets and right-of-ways, and also parks area. Which kind of, I guess, to me leads me to some of the protest camps that continually surface in the different areas of town. And so what I've my experience is that generally within a 1 or 2 blocks radius around the camps, we have a spike in criminal activity, and also a large amount of debris, and a large amount of reports of human defecation and urination, and all sorts of behaviors that are frustrating. And so I think one of the concerns, it just kind of falls over into the spillover into the neighborhoods. Because the downtown has some existing ordinances that the rest of the city doesn't, we are able to maybe control that behavior from happening in the core downtown easier than we are in other areas of town. And so you've seen the protest camp go in areas that border the downtown area, which I have to say is not necessarily because they want to avoid, they're really looking for high visible areas because they're trying to make a statement. And so that's why they select the areas that they're at. And in fact, if you talk with Mr. Jackson, he will often have conversations with you about his next strategy of why he's going to pick the location and where he's going to go next. So when I see the correlation that some people think that we've pushed the protest camps out of downtown and now they're in the neighborhoods, and is that the solution? But what I can say is that he's very selective and purposeful in his behaviors and what he's trying to do. So anyway, it's very it takes a lot of patience by the officers to enforce and have those relationships with Mr. Jackson and people that camp with him. And so, I think you heard when Sergeant Haywood was here talking about care and resilience with the team. We also are paying close attention to the care and resilience for those officers that are continually deployed to deal with those situations. So it's tough, because it's, in one respect, is camping, is it really a police job? So, we all toy with that. Is that really the job of the police department, or should there be another solution? So
we are running up past the time limit, actually. As one final question, is there anything that we can do as a commission to help you in your work?
Well, some things that are coming up on within the next 1 or 2 years is that they're really Riverfront project is going in, and Fifth Street area is really expanding, And so I think one of the things that should be considered is, should we expand both the boundaries of the downtown patrol team, but also should we increase the footprint of the downtown activity zone with the ordinances that go with it to help, as a strategy to deal with maybe some behaviors, like if we can predict it, we can prevent it, kind of thing. So anyway, I think that's something that you guys could consider and discuss and see whether that's viable.
Sweet. Thank you so much.
All right,
thank
you're
you.
very welcome.
Thank you, Sergeant.
So we have run up past the community outreach team. We've already mentioned that there's the Eugene celebration coming up this Saturday and Sunday. We have a couple of extra slots. We have one from 12 to 2 on both Saturday and Sunday. One from 2 to 4 on Sunday. One from 4 to 6 on Saturday. And one from, one from also from 4 to 6 on Sunday. I will be taking a slot on Saturday. If anybody else would like to volunteer for this or check your schedule, you can do so now, or meet me after the meeting, or send us an email.
I can do part of that, 12 to 2 on Saturday.
Okay.
I'm gonna maybe be doing Qigong, performing on I don't know if it's Saturday or Sunday.
Okay.
And that only takes 15, 20 minutes anyway, so.
Sweet. If anybody else needs to look at your schedule, we can do that later as well and get us out of here on time. So let's move into closing comments. Do you want to take it off again, Pete?
Not really. How about we go the other way?
Before closing comments, are you planning to form that committee?
Oh, yes. We also are having new board members, or commission members joining us. We need to have a subcommittee help make recommendations based on that. Is there anybody who's interested in helping out with it? I know you've done it before, Terry.
Yes, but I was going to send to Jeremy. I'm going to end my tenure this June, so.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Thank you. Miss you. I will let them know.
Okay.
This coming June.
Are you talking about interviewing them, or?
Yeah, Terry,
Being
you
part
want to
of
talk
the-
a
Yeah,
little bit about
you
what
go
this entails?
through all of the applications first and select who the people that you think would be good to be interviewed.
Okay.
And then there's a small, fairly quick interview session. And then we just make recommendations, because then you have to meet the mayor and she really makes a decision.
Okay.
So, but,
Right.
we do a little pre-sorting, so to speak, and.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the
Yeah.
explaining
It's
the
interesting,
process.
yeah. I don't know, how many are you expecting, Jeremy?
5, 6 maybe?
Oh, you're kidding.
As far as applicants, so
Oh, no, I mean absences. How many slots?
Yeah.
So there's 4 that are coming up,
And
and so I've got some that are terming out and cannot come back. I've got a couple that have, sounds like now canceled. Yours is an addition, so that would be a 5th. So I haven't heard back about a couple of them, whether or not they're planning to return.
Okay.
So,
So,
I'll help.
okay.
Yeah.
V? Amanda, or
For what?
To help
Right.
interview the potential new.
Would it be like during Monday through Friday, 9 to 5? Do you think?
The committee gets to pick what
Yeah.
time you want to talk
Okay.
to
If it's
people.
the reason I say if it's during those hours, it's nearly impossible for me to make things. So if it's outside of that, I could do it.
I think because there are so many folks who aren't here today, we can also send out
Yeah.
an email about it. Is that appropriate?
the problem with that is that you don't form a committee then until next month, which will give you a very short window.
Can we form the committee today with just V and I, and then also include anybody who wants to be involved?
I can be on can I be on the committee and not, I mean, I
I
can
would
help
love that.
go through the
Yeah, you
applicants
can.
and whatnot.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
absolutely.
mind, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
Then with the 3 of us,
that because it doesn't make a quorum, so you just can't hit a quorum.
all right. Cool. Let's, is there anybody who would make a motion to that effect?
I make a motion that we form a committee for reviewing applicants for our positions on the commission to be made up of V and Sean and myself.
Sweet. Give me a second.
I'll second.
Everybody in favor?
Quickly.
Aye. Anybody opposed? All right. Looks like that passes. Thank you so much. And as far as comments are concerned, I don't have any. Thank you all for being here.
I don't have any either.
Sweet.
I was just gonna comment, I noticed that Chief Skinner said that policing in Eugene is a unique thing, and it sort of struck me today listening to everyone talk that our police force is very unique. So, like, the way that this force responds and works in the community is quite lovely. I had an experience with EPD today working with one of the most difficult people I deal with at work, and they did such a lovely job. So I just wanted to comment.
The NAACP Freedom Fund dinner is a week from Friday, so that's the 21st, and tickets are available on Eventbrite if that's of interest to anybody. And I don't have any further comments.
Neither do I.
Nothing.
Just thank everyone for coming tonight.
All right.
Missing you, Chris.
Get out of
So
here just
get in
on
touch,
time.
Sean, when you want to
Yeah.
have a meeting.
Yeah.
You email us?
Just email us.
All right. That sounds good.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
the Asian celebration.
I'm doing,
For, like,
I would
yeah,
volunteer for that. I'm already
document renewal.
committed to 4 hours for HRC, so I'll be there.
Oh, so you're gonna be
I'm
there
already
anyway?
gonna be there,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, so you're doing double, you're representing
Yeah.
two different organizations.